I'm Juliette Lowry. I go to the University of South Florida, Tampa Bay. I'm doing my practicum here in the beautiful Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University. As a part of my assignment, I'm working for the Student Affairs Dean's Office, where I'm doing my research in hazing. As a part of this presentation, I'm going to speak about 4 topics on hazing. First, I'm going to talk about what hazing is and give you a working definition for it. Secondly, we're going to talk about the legal aspects and case law surrounding hazing. Then we're going to move on to how universities respond to these cases and to the law, and then also why there isn't sufficient research on this topic to explain why hazing occurs. Hazing is any activity expected of someone joining or participating in a group that humiliates, degrades, abuses, or endangers them, regardless of a person's willingness to participate. So there are 4 kinds of hazing or initiation activities. There are those that are acceptable, questionable, unacceptable, and those involving alcohol. So an example of an acceptable hazing activity would be participating in a skit night or signing a contract saying that you're okay to uphold these standards. A questionable activity would be yelling, cursing, swearing, or wearing embarrassing clothing. An unacceptable activity would be being tied up, kidnapped, or made to do something that it goes against all of your morals. And then an alcohol-related hazing activity would be those that involve drinking an alcoholic beverage or participating in drinking games. Recent hazing incidents that have made it to the national news highlight the prominence of this issue on college campuses today. At Florida A&M University, a first-year band member, Robert Champion, died after taking a brutal beating down the aisle of a school bus. It's a rite of passage known as crossing over for the band, but because of it, 11 of his band members were arrested for the crime. At Cornell University, a fraternity pledge, George Desdunes, died of alcohol poisoning after being kidnapped, blindfolded, and restrained with duct tape in a hazing ritual known as Hell Week. The house is being sued for $25 million, and nationally, over the past 5 years, this fraternity has seen at least 5 other deaths similar to this one. At Radford University, a fraternity pledge, Sam Mason, died of alcohol poisoning in a time drinking test. 7 of the fraternity members were arrested, but the fraternity's code of silence, which is common in Greek life, hindered the police investigation greatly. Hank Newer, a self-declared anti-hazing activist and expert, created this map to better track actual, documented hazing deaths. Although no legitimate government agency collects these statistics, Newer has collected over 109 cases dating back to 1870. He did it by contacting coroners, universities, and news agencies using keywords to search through their databases like horseplay and alcohol. What makes this interesting is that young people aren't supposed to die. And then when they do in a university setting, we ask ourselves why. And we don't really understand why they're doing this, why this practice is sustained, and why it's leading to such extremes. In addition, as student affairs professionals, we ask ourselves what we're doing to prevent those things, what we're doing to respond to those things, and then why we're doing them, and if it's effective. There are several trends for the case law regarding hazing over time. The first one, in loco parentis, meaning in place of the parents, is outdated and no longer supported by courts. The second one, the landowner invitee, states that a level of care is owed to the invitee to ensure that conditions of the space are reasonably safe. So in hazing, the court held that university has an obligation to protect students from foreseeable acts of hazing. The third one, duty of care, exists when a special relationship between a student and the university exists, like an athlete in a college when a student is actively recruited and supported by the university, and very few students fall into this category. With the precedent already set, universities are responding in two ways. In the first way, universities are making rules saying that hazing is not allowed and describing what that means in greater depth, which is often criticized as lip service. And secondly, some universities are taking preemptive measures to ensure that hazing doesn't occur, like putting advisors in fraternity houses that live on site and can tell you what's going on with the students in greater depth. While I was doing the research for hazing, I found a couple of things. I found that most of the research that exists is superficial and doesn't go into any depth. And it lacks most academic thought. It usually errs on two sides of the spectrum. On one side, it says that boys will be boys and that hazing is one of those natural things. And on the other side, that hazing is awful and needs to stop immediately, without very little in between, which would answer questions like why hazing occurs or what these rituals mean to the students. I decided to take my research a step further and investigate why there isn't any substantial research on hazing, and I found a couple of possible reasons. For one, most fraternities, sororities, Greek life, and hazing-related rituals are secretive in nature. But also, I don't think that would be enough, since most advisors, friends, and peers know that it's happening. Secondly, I thought that it could be attributed to male privilege. Thirdly, that fraternities, sororities, Greek life, and those clubs become better donors afterwards, and universities let it slide. Fourthly, that advisors are unwilling to take the step to stop it because they don't want to kill the party, and they don't want to be that person. It could also be attributed to a number of other factors within the culture at that university that support it or even worship that kind of behavior. I contacted Susan Schooner, an academic from Rutgers University who did her dissertation on hazing, and she helped me to further explore options on why this research doesn't exist by looking at the ethical dilemmas around the topic. The very nature of hazing makes it incredibly difficult to ethically research the topic, given that survey responses can be misleading. With such a sensitive topic, the desire to collect more reliable data is evident, but the means to attain them are very limited. With any observation-based research, the researcher has an ethical obligation to intervene if a situation was to escalate, which naturally detracts from the collection of data. Additionally, interviewing a student after a traumatic experience could cause serious mental repercussions, and thus leaves the research with very few avenues to collect legitimate knowledge. While I was doing my research at Loyola Marymount University, I was asked to look into the university itself to see which clubs were more likely to experience hazing there. While their Greek life is smaller on campus, I found that a lot of advisors were willing to admit that it was occurring in their Greek life system, but also that it was more likely to occur in intramurals and service organizations because service organizations are so selective and exclusive that it's actually more competitive to gain entrance into a service organization than it is into a fraternity or a sorority. All in all, the most difficult hurdle in all of this research was the lack of real substantial academic research on the topic. And we know that there are a lot of reasons as to why this research doesn't exist, and a lot of really specific ethical reasons as to why we can't research it. But I think we do need to put more into those areas and figuring out what we can do as a university to better understand this ritual, this rite of passage that's so important to our students and it's sustained over hundreds of years.